Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Well, Title IX is supposed to make sure that women in America have as many opportunities as men do when it comes to sports and other things, especially in a school environment. But would adding gender identity into Title IX actually ensure that women are forced to compete against biological men in any case? Alexa Schwerha is a reporter for Campus Reform and a Division II collegiate swimmer. Alexa, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be back.
About a half a century ago, I was a swimmer, but only in junior high, and nothing to write home about. I was on a team with a lot better people. But every time I see one of these stories about someone being beat by another swimmer who's a biological male, and beat by some substantial margins, I think about how I would have reacted to that if that had been me or had been one of my teammates back in the day.
Absolutely. And this is a situation that should outrage everybody. It's not just affecting women. It's not just affecting swimmers. This is now a nationwide American issue. We all need to be in tune because what we're seeing come out of the Department of Education are changes to Title IX, as you just said, that would expand the definition of sex to now include gender identity. So what this means is if a man identifies as a woman, he's now legally able to be protected under Title IX. And let's go back and just talk about what Title IX did in the first place. It prevented discrimination based on sex. And because of this, women have been able to shatter glass ceilings and really take hold of opportunities for over 50 years. And like you said, it's outrageous that now we're just brushing this aside. In order to cater to radical gender ideology, women are able to be discriminated against. And this is what the Biden administration is pushing.
And they want to push it not by going to the Congress, to the people's representatives. They want to do this through the administrative law process where no one who makes the decisions is actually somebody who's directly accountable to the voters. Am I right?
Absolutely, because what we've seen kind of the Biden administration is they think they know what the majority of Americans want. But I can tell you that I go to college campuses and I talk to many, many students who are standing up and saying that this radical gender ideology is wrong and men don't belong in women's sports because we know that there is a clear biological advantage that men have when it comes to physical activities such as sports. But I've been very happy to see in my reporting for the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform, many states come out and say the same as those students that this is wrong and women's sports must be protected. Women's fairness, women's integrity has to be protected. And so here at the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform, we've been tracking all of the different states that have been putting laws in the books to protect fairness and integrity in women's sports in their own states. And lately, Tennessee has become the latest state to take such action. And in those states, men aren't allowed to compete in women's sports. You have to compete based on your biological sex, the sex that is on your birth certificate. And this is a monumental change. This is going to have monumental implications for women's sports. This is how we're going to protect women's sports and make sure that women are given a fair shot. Because what the Biden administration wants to do is erase women from their own spaces. This nonsense with Title IX, with expanding it to gender identity, is going to have real-life implications. We've already seen how this disastrous mindset, how this disastrous narrative plays out in the real world. I'm sure we all saw what happened at the NCAA Women's Swimming Championship. When a man was allowed to compete, women were erased from their own competition. Because a man was allowed to compete, Emma Wyatt is not a national champion. Because a man was allowed to compete, how many swimmers were displaced for the competition, and how many swimmers had to sit on the sideline because their spot was stolen by a biological man? So like you said in the start, this is something that should outrage everybody. It's not only affecting women, it's not only affecting swimmers or athletes, but this is something that we all have to get riled up about because we're talking about discriminating and lawfully discriminating against the whole gender, a whole portion of our population.
You know, I mentioned to you, Alexa, that when I was in junior high, I swam. And I swam on medleys. I swam in some individual events. But, you know, the big events were the 50 meters and the 100 meters. And my better teammates did extraordinarily well in those areas. I was not nearly so good. So I took on some of the events nobody wanted to swim, like the 500 meters. And they all said, oh, that's, you know, it's like asking a sprinter if they want to go out and do cross country. They don't want to do it. And I had a friend tell me, I don't know, 10 or 15 years later, I still had the pool record for the 500. Not anything to write home about. But this is going to change things because as we see these new records set, We're used to seeing swimmers and runners and all these other athletes compete to say, maybe I can beat the record. You know, I mean, I happen to know a lady from years ago who was a runner, and she set something like 34 different records, 17 of them international. Except what's going to happen to women swimmers in the future if the biological male swimmers set these new benchmarks, you know, these new, times in, say, swimming? Then those are times that will probably never be eclipsed by a woman ever, aren't they? Aren't they times that are never going to be beaten by a biological woman?
It's a fair concern, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because when we're talking about the implications that these changes to Title IX have, this is what we're talking about. And like I said, it's not only affecting women or swimmers. I mean, this is coming for our daughters, our young girls who are now, rising up in this upcoming generation. You know, when I was growing up, I was lucky enough to have parents who told me that I could do whatever I wanted with hard work and determination. I could make something of myself. But, I mean, what are these young girls seeing now? They're seeing their opportunities be stolen by biological men who have a biological advantage. So what we're now telling young women, and what these changes to Title IX are telling and showing young women, is no matter how hard they work, no matter how much effort or time they put into something, it's never going to be good enough, because a biological man can come in, use their biological advantage, and just automatically do better because of something that they were born with. And it's not fair to make these young girls or our current athletes try to compete a little more or work a little harder or put in the extra effort to make up for something that they have no control over. We know from simple science that there are differences between men and women. On average, men are going to be taller. They're going to have a larger wingspan, larger organs. They circulate blood faster. This all has real-time implications when we're talking about those physical activities like sports and athletics. This has nothing to do with just catering to gender ideology. It has everything to do with science. And it's funny because Democrats consistently say that they're the party of science. Liberals, progressives, they like to say they follow the science, but they seem to forget the science that shows there's a difference between men and women. And it's very convenient that the science is forgotten when it's women that are being hurt, women that are being erased, and women that are being discriminated against.
Yeah, and Alexa, it's funny, I never ran track, but, I mean, even before I was born, they had the first man best a 4-minute mile, in running, right? And I looked up just the other day, I thought, has a woman ever hit the 4-minute mark? Now, it was hit by a man in 1954. I mean, that was 5 years before I was born. And now men, some runners can consistently beat a 4-minute mile. Has a woman ever done it? And the answer is no. Despite the fact that all those years have gone by, close to 70 years, the best a woman has ever done is 4 minutes, 12 seconds. And I thought of that and how that will affect swimming and running and all these other events, that you may literally have marks set by these male athletes that will never be beaten by a woman. Alexa, keep up the great work, and we always appreciate you weighing in on the show.
Thank you guys for having me.
You bet. That's Alexa Schwerha, who's a reporter for Campus Reform.